The Western Front was a place where sound ruled over sight. Artillery shells screamed louder than reason, rifles cracked like splinters of lightning, and every few minutes the earth trembled as if trying to shake the war off its broken back. Yet on some nights, on the rare, hushed ones when the wind held its breath, the silence became even more unnerving. It was on such a night that Capitaine Henri Morel first conceived the idea that would later be known as the ghost train deception. The French command post sat dug into a shallow hillside, dim oil lamps flickering against sandbags patched with mud, the smell of damp canvas mixed with the metallic scent of cold iron. Inside, young Lieutenant Etienne Lambert pored over a set of reconnaissance maps when Morel entered with his usual brisk steps, boots leaving the sound of wet, impatient thuds. "Another flyover," Etienne said, without looking up. "Twice today. Their pilot circles the same arc every time. He's mapping troop movements, or at least searching for them." Morel removed his gloves with a snap, revealing hands stained with charcoal and dried oil, signs of a man who drifted between battlefield strategy and the mechanical puzzles that fascinated him. "Kramer, that's the name I've heard. The Germans trust his eyes more than their own generals." Etienne finally looked up. "If they keep observing our lines this closely, they'll notice the lack of reinforcements. They'll hit the weak point and break through." Morel's jaw clenched. "Exactly. We must convince them that reinforcements are arriving. If they believe we're shifting divisions toward this sector, they'll reroute their own troops to meet the threat." Etienne raised an eyebrow. "A bluff?" Morel corrected. "A performance, but one they need only see from the sky." The lieutenant frowned. "But we don't have trains to spare. And even if we did, the lines here are partly destroyed. The Germans would hear real engines, real movement." Morel's eyes gleamed. "I don't intend to move trains. I intend to move the illusion of trains." Etienne blinked twice, unsure if the captain was joking. But Morel was already pulling out a folded sheet of paper from his jacket, a rough sketch of a locomotive outlined with confident strokes. Windows, lights, wheels, steam pipes. Below it, he'd scribbled mechanisms, rotating drums, lantern arrays, sound resonance boards. "You see, Lieutenant," Morel said, tapping the page with a calloused hand, "we don't need steel to convince the Germans. Their pilot flies at a height where details blur. What he sees is shape, light, shadow, and what he hears is muffled by wind." Etienne leaned closer. "Are you proposing a fake train?" "A whole convoy." The young officer laughed under his breath, then stopped when he realized Morel wasn't smiling. "You're serious?" Morel nodded. "Dead serious. We'll build silhouettes, sound makers, smoke decoys. From above, it will look like an entire supply line is active again." Etienne tried to imagine it, a theatrical trick performed on an open battlefield. "Sir, with all due respect, we're soldiers, not stage magicians." Morel's voice softened. "War gives us little comfort, but deception, that's a weapon we still command." 2 days later, Etienne found himself standing in front of a forgotten stretch of railway hidden deep within a frost-bitten forest. The tracks, rusted and misaligned in places, belonged to an old secondary line abandoned after the initial months of the war. Moss crept between the sleepers, and branches arched overhead like skeletal arms. Morel joined him, brushing aside the brittle overgrowth. "Perfect. Their reconnaissance plane usually passes 3 kilometers east and circles in a wide radius. If we place our decoys here, in the gaps of the trees, it will seem like a protected supply route." Etienne still didn't see how wooden frames would mimic armored train cars, but he trusted Morel. The captain had a reputation for unorthodox strategies that somehow worked. False supply dumps, mirrored signals, exaggerated artillery shadows. Within hours, a crew of carpenters, engineers, and even a former stagehand, Private Armand Duclair, arrived with tool chests and crates of supplies. Armand surveyed the tracks with an artist's squint. "So, Captain, you want theater and the woods." Morel clapped him on the shoulder. "Exactly. Make it convincing enough that a man half a kilometer above the earth swears he saw a train." Armand grinned. "Then we'll give him one he'll never forget." Work began immediately. They erected lightweight wagon frames built from timber and canvas, painted in muted grays to mimic armored cars. Metal plates bolted along the sides caught the faint glimmer of moonlight. Etienne helped cut panels, his hands blistering despite gloves. The cold bit through fabric like a living thing. "You know," Armand said as he brushed soot on one of the frames to create the illusion of engine grime, "I once built a rotating lighthouse effect using nothing but a lantern and a tin cylinder with holes. Could make it look like a ship was approaching from miles away." Etienne smirked. "And now you're making trains out of shadows." "War," Armand said with a shrug, "is just theater with higher stakes." By the third night, the engine was ready. An impressive canvas and wood front with a conic faux boiler, complete with painted rivets and a metal pipe for smoke. Behind it, they constructed 7 cars, each one shaped like a long, boxy silhouette. Through carefully placed slits, lanterns could shine outward, appearing as windows passing through the trees. But sound was the true challenge. Morel oversaw the creation of a resonance tunnel built from hollow barrels laid along the tracks. When struck with metal rods, they produced deep, rhythmic vibrations eerily similar to turning steel wheels. Etienne tested them with a mallet. Tong, tong, tong. Armand whistled. "If I didn't know better, I'd say there's a train 2 minutes out." Morel grinned. "Exactly what the Germans will think."
On the 5th night, the fog rolled in thick as wool, settling between the trees like pale ghosts. Perfect cover. "You're nervous," Etienne said to Armand, who kept adjusting a lantern bolt for the 10th time. "Of course I'm nervous," Armand muttered. "Tonight we performed for an audience of 1 German pilot, and if he doesn't applaud, he'll drop bombs on our heads." Morel approached, checking his pocket watch. Kramer usually appears around 23:40. Everyone in position. Etienne, gripping his mallet, felt his heartbeat match the rhythm he'd soon deliver. Wooden silhouettes loomed in the fog, motionless yet strangely alive. The forest grew quieter. Even the crickets seemed to pause. Then, faint at first, a low drone, a vibration in the air, the kind that made instinctively glance upward. "The airplane," Etienne whispered. Morel raised a hand. "Begin." Etienne struck the first barrel. Tong, tong, tong. Across the track line, others followed, timing their hit to mimic the rolling cadence of wheels. The sound traveled through the barrels, deepening, echoing outward into the mist. Armand adjusted the lantern wheel, sending a sweep of yellow light gliding through the carved slits, like windows passing along the convoy. Low smoke puffed from the faux engine pipe, released by hidden charcoal burner, packed with damp leaves to thicken the trail. Morel tilted his head. "Listen, he's descending." Indeed, the drone grew louder. The German plane cut through the clouds, a dark silhouette sliding across the moon. Etienne held his breath. Would it work? The plane banked, circled, and angled toward the valley where the fake train moved.
its spotlight flicked on, slicing across treetops. Armand whispered, "Come on, believe it, just believe it." The light swept over the forest and paused, straight over their decoy line. Etienne's pulse thundered. Morel allowed himself a rare, slow smile. He sees it. The plane circled once more, almost as if following the imaginary movement of the convoy, then tilted away and vanished into the fog. Silence returned. Armand exhaled so loudly, Etienne almost laughed. "Mon Dieu," the stagehand gasped, "we fooled him." Morel closed his pocket watch with a soft click. "If Kramer reports what he thinks he saw, the Germans will adjust their positions tomorrow, and then we prepare Act 2. Etienne stared at the dark sky where the pilot had vanished. For the first time since the war began, he felt they might win a battle not through force, but through imagination.
The morning after the first performance of the Ghost Train, the French command post buzzed with tension. Rumors ran faster than the cold wind threading through the trenches. Soldiers whispered about strange noises from the forest, about ghosts, about iron beasts returning to abandoned lines. By midday, intelligence reports confirmed what Morel had hoped. The German High Command had redirected 2 infantry regiments and an artillery battery to reinforce a sector miles away from where the French lines were actually weakest. Etienne brought the report to Morel, who read it slowly, his lips curling upward as he reached the final paragraph. "They took the bait?" Etienne asked. "They swallowed the hook," Morel replied. "And now they're busy rearranging their lines in anticipation of reinforcements that will never come." Etienne exhaled, letting himself savor the rare feeling of triumph. So the plan worked. "For one night," Morel said, folding the paper and tucking it away. "But if we want this illusion to continue, our little theater needs to stay open." Etienne nodded. "Then we keep performing." By late afternoon, the team was back in the forest. The fog had lifted, revealing the handcrafted silhouettes, the painted locomotive, the timber frames, the lantern slits, now looking less impressive without the night's cover. Armand Duclair, their resident stagehand, paced around the faux engine with a hammer in hand, tapping beams and tightening loose joints. "Daylight is cruel. Everything looks like a child's toy when the sun is out," Morel muttered. "They only need to fool the Germans from 500 meters up, not the crows," he said. Armand smirked. "Still, let me at least pretend we're professionals." Etienne smiled, but his mind was already on the next step. "Sir, how long can we keep this up? Once, twice, maybe a week? Won't they eventually realize the tracks are dormant?" Morel leaned against a tree trunk, arms crossed. "That's why we won't repeat the same show. Each night we adjust something. Lights, timing, sound pattern, smoke intensity. To an observer, it'll seem like real logistical movement. Different trains, different schedules." "Exactly." Armand clapped his hands. "If we're going to build an entire imaginary railway system, I want tickets and uniforms." Morel shot him a look. "You'll get a medal instead if you don't get blown up first." Armand made a mock salute. "That's the theater spirit." For the next 2 nights, the forest transformed into a secret workshop. Soldiers who normally dug trenches or cleaned rifles found themselves sawing beams, painting canvas, and assembling lantern rigs under the guidance of Armand and Morel. New cars were added, a fuel tanker shape with a cylindrical frame, a low flatbed, and even a crude imitation of an armored wagon. Etienne organized the crews, ensuring that the sound barrels were spaced irregularly along the tracks, so the train could appear longer or shorter depending on the desired illusion. By the second night, the Germans had another flyover. This time, the clouds were clear, and the moon exposed every mistake. Etienne held his breath as the enemy plane approached, its engine slicing the sky like a razor. "We start in 10 seconds," Morel whispered. "Everyone ready?" Armand adjusted the rotating lantern cylinder. "Born ready, Captain." Etienne gripped the mallet. His palms were damp despite the cold. "Now," Morel called. The forest exploded with orchestrated motion. Tong, tong, lantern rays passing through slits, flickering like moving windows. Damp charcoal smoke rising in thick, unnatural plumes. Two soldiers pulling on ropes to sway the canvas frames, mimicking slight rocking. At ground level, it looked ridiculous. Anyone standing 5 steps away could see through the entire illusion. But from the air, that was what mattered. The German spotlight barely grazed the treetops before settling on the line. Etienne saw the beam linger as the plane performed a slow, careful circle, far longer than the first night. "He's studying us," Armand whispered. "Doesn't feel right." Morel did not react, his gaze fixed on the sky. "Let him study. We've given him more detail this time. That's the point." Etienne kept striking the barrels, and the deep rumble carried through the valley. The plane banked to the left, then right, then climbed. Only when the drone faded did Morel exhale. "He believed it," Etienne said, relief softening his voice. "For now," Morel murmured.
The next morning brought confirmation. German radio intercepts, decoded only partially, spoke of continued French rail activity, large-scale troop repositioning, and logistical buildup along the southern ridge. Morel tapped the deciphered lines. "They're convinced a major offensive is coming." "Are we going to launch one?" Etienne asked. "Not here, but the more they reinforce the false front, the easier it becomes for our forces elsewhere." Morel closed the folder. "This deception is bigger than us now. Command wants us to keep the operation running. Indefinitely." Etienne swallowed. Indefinitely meant weeks, maybe months, meant risk, meant lives, meant the Germans would grow suspicious. But if this illusion kept real soldiers alive, "Then we keep the trains running," he said. Morel nodded. "Exactly." Maintaining the deception became an art form. Armand redesigned the lantern mechanism to simulate different patterns, sometimes brighter, sometimes dimmer, sometimes arranged in a staggered sequence as if multiple engines were present. A group of musicians among the soldiers discovered that dragging a metal grate across the sleepers created a chillingly realistic squeal. Morel incorporated it into the nightly soundscape. "This is madness," Etienne muttered one evening as he supervised men covering the tracks with pitch-soaked cloth to create the illusion of oil. Armand winked. "All great art is madness." War included, apparently. "Oh, war is the greatest theater of all, and we're part of its strangest play." But with each passing night, tension grew. The Germans changed their reconnaissance patterns. Instead of a single flyover at predictable hours, planes appeared at random times, sometimes early evening, sometimes pre-dawn. Once, while Etienne was replacing a broken frame, a plane emerged from the clouds without warning. The roar of its engine dropped like a stone. "Down!" someone yelled. Etienne dove behind a log as the spotlight grazed the tracks. The team had no time to activate the illusion. No sound, no smoke, no lights. Just shadows and half-assembled shapes. The plane circled once, twice. Etienne held his breath until his chest burned. Finally, the plane veered north. Armand climbed out from under the tarpaulin, shaking. That was too close. If he'd flown 10 meters lower. Morel cut him off. "We adapt. Starting tonight, the decoys stay partially illuminated at all times. Lanterns ready, smoke burner warm, No more improvisation. We must appear active at any hour. Etienne nodded, knowing what that meant. No rest, no mistakes, no safe moments.
Days turned into a strange rhythm. The real war thundered in the distance, artillery echoing over trenches, while the men in the forest waged a different kind of battle, one made of shadows and sound. Some soldiers joked that they'd been transferred from the infantry to a Paris opera troupe. Others muttered that they were tempting fate, inviting German shells with their nightly performances. And yet, the deception continued to work. Germans kept redirecting troops. Their offensive slowed, their artillery fire shifted away from the real vulnerabilities. Etienne watched the reports with a growing sense of awe. "We're changing the course of the front," he whispered. Morel placed a hand on his shoulder. "Illusion, Lieutenant, is a more powerful weapon than any cannon." But not everything was triumph. One night, during a routine train movement, a lantern broke and fell onto a canvas frame. Flames licked upward. Soldiers rushed with buckets, sloshing muddy water, stamping and beating until the fire died. Armand sat trembling afterward, clutching the charred wooden beam. "If they had seen that flame from the sky," he stammered. "They didn't," Morel said firmly. "We move on." Another night, a German plane dropped a flare, a dazzling white sun that burned the sky, revealing far more than darkness normally allowed. Men froze as the forest stood exposed. Yet somehow, miraculously, the flare drifted too far west. The decoy line remained hidden behind a rise of terrain, shadows swallowing their crude construction. Etienne felt the aftershock for hours. "We're running out of miracles." Morel gave a tired smile. "Which is why we never rely on them." But Etienne saw the truth. Each close call etched deeper lines on the captain's face. The ghost train was becoming harder to sustain. And the Germans, they were beginning to wonder. They weren't fools. They were soldiers too. They had instincts. Suspicion would come. It always did. The question was when. Or worse, who would notice it first? Across the lines, in a German encampment lit by lanterns and tension, a pilot named Lieutenant Otto Kramer stared at his reconnaissance sketches. His pencil hovered over a patch of forest where he had seen the shadow of a train. Something wasn't adding up, and he intended to find out why.
Lieutenant Otto Kramer had flown more than 100 reconnaissance missions since the war began, and in all that time he had learned one unquestionable truth. The land lies less than the men who fight over it. Fields, forests, roads, rivers, these stayed honest. They didn't conspire or deceive. They simply existed, and it was a pilot's job to read them like a book. But now, staring at his sketches of the French-held forest sector, Kramer felt as if the land itself were lying to him. He spread his papers across a wooden table inside the German forward operations tent. Lantern light flickered across his face, sharpening the lines of concentration etched into his brow. His observer and closest friend, Oberfeldwebel Hans Metz, leaned over his shoulder. "Still thinking about that train?" Kramer tapped his pencil on the sketch. 3 nights in a row, Hans. 3 movements, always at night, always along a track that was supposedly damaged last month. Rail lines get repaired. Not that fast, Kramer pointed at the scribbled trees. And here, this section is deep inside forest cover, yet I saw smoke rising as if from a locomotive. And the lights, they looked strange. Strange how? Kramer hesitated. Artificial, as if they were controlled, not like the soft flicker of an engine's coal fire. Hans chuckled. Perhaps the French have invented a new type of locomotive. Kramer didn't laugh.
Or they're hiding something. He sat back, folding his arms. Command believes there's a build-up of French divisions in that sector. They've already shifted 2 regiments. And you think they're wrong? I think, Kramer said quietly, that someone is showing us exactly what they want us to see. While Kramer puzzled over the strange reports, the French ghost train crew prepared for another night of deception. The cold had deepened, wrapping the forest in a biting stillness. The men worked with stiff fingers, breath steaming in the air. Etienne Lambert rubbed his hands together as he checked the resonance barrels. If this wind doesn't settle, the sound will scatter. Armand Duclair approached with a handful of lanterns. The wind is our enemy only if we let it be. It can also distort the light in ways that help us. Etienne raised a skeptical eyebrow. Is that optimism or theater talk? Both, Armand replied with a grin, then grew serious. But be careful tonight. I heard artillery shift last evening. The Germans are restless. Morel arrived then, wearing his heavy blue coat, his boots coated with frost. You all know your positions. We keep the pattern irregular, as we practiced. Etienne noticed that Morel looked more tired than usual, eyes sunken, movement slower. Sir, he said quietly, how much longer will we continue? For as long as it keeps our lines intact. Our real divisions are preparing for a counteroffensive in the north. If we stop now, the Germans will realize their mistake and redeploy. Every night buys our men time. Etienne swallowed his discomfort. Then we won't fail. The forest grew darker as night took hold. The moon hid behind clouds, which was both a blessing and a curse. Harder for the Germans to see, but harder for the French to judge their own illusion. Still, the ghost train prepared. Lanterns lit, smoke burners warmed, canvas frames steadied, resonance barrels primed. Then the sound reached them. A distant engine, faint but unmistakable. Morel froze. That's not ours. Etienne's heart thudded. They've dispatched more planes. No, Morel murmured carefully. It's lower, heavier. That's a second aircraft engine, not the usual reconnaissance one. Armand whispered, They're sending 2? But Morel shook his head slowly. Not 2 reconnaissance planes, 2 different types. One fast, one slow, one observing, one hunting. Etienne felt the chill crawl into his spine. A fighter escort? It means they suspect something. Tonight we must be flawless. He signaled the men. Prepare.
On the German side, Kramer leaned forward in his cockpit, goggles fogging slightly as he scanned the tree line. The second craft, a fighter, flew 20 meters above him, ready to defend the reconnaissance mission. He felt both reassured and offended. He didn't need protection. He needed clarity. As the forest filled his view, Kramer's instincts sharpened. He peered into the shadows. Lights flickered again, tiny yellow squares moving between branches. There, Kramer radioed to Hans. Mark the coordinates. Hans peered downward. I see it, but it looks strange. Kramer dipped the nose of the plane slightly, descending to a more dangerous altitude. Below them, the ghost train illusion was in full motion. Etienne struck the first barrel. Tong, tong, tong. Armand cranked the lantern cylinder. Light slits glided like windows passing quickly by. Smoke billowed from the canvas engine's pipe, mixing with the night mist. To the untrained eye, or one trusting expectation, it might have looked convincing, but Kramer was not convinced. He narrowed his gaze. Something is wrong. Hans gripped the edge of the cockpit. What? The smoke, Kramer said. It is too thick. Real coal smoke disperses differently. Hans frowned. Could be humidity.
And the light, look carefully, Kramer said, angling the plane so the spotlight of the fighter illuminated the forest below. It repeats. The pattern loops every few seconds. Hans stiffened. Repeats. Impossible for a real train. Kramer nodded grimly. Because it is not a real train. On the ground, Etienne saw the fighter's light cut across the sky like a blade. He felt exposed, vulnerable. "Captain," he shouted to Morel. "They're analyzing us." Morel clenched his jaw. "Increase smoke, change rhythm. Armand, alter the lantern pattern, make it uneven." Armand scrambled, twisting knobs, spinning the cylinder faster. The lights jittered, flickered in new sequences. Etienne changed the sound rhythm. Long strikes, then short, then uneven pulses. Morel barked, "If they want randomness, we give them chaos." Etienne prayed it would work. Kramer tracked the shifting lights. The smoke now billowed erratically. The rhythm of the wheels changed. Hans looked unsure. Could be an old engine, mechanical inconsistencies. "No," Kramer muttered. "They're improvising." He pulled the plane lower. Hans gripped his arm. "Otto, too close to the trees." "I need to see the wheels. If they are turning, it's real. If not—" He pulled the plane into a hard bank. The forest rose toward them. Branches blurred, and in one brief, crucial second, Kramer saw it. Not wheels, but canvas. A wooden rib beneath the painted surface. A lantern glinting through a slit. A barrel being struck by a mallet. He jerked the stick upward. "Fake! It's all fake! A decoy!" Hans stared in disbelief. The French built trains out of wood? "And they fooled us," Kramer said bitterly, "for days." The fighter pilot radioed in confusion. "Do we attack?" Kramer hesitated. He could order the destruction of the entire operation now. One pass, one strafing run, and the ghost train would be gone. But something held him back. Respect. A strange, grudging admiration. "They outsmarted us," Hans whispered. "Ingenious, really." Kramer took a long breath. "Report the truth, and pull back. The forest is likely filled with traps. No use wasting ammunition." The fighter pilot protested, but Kramer insisted. "We return, immediately." The two aircraft banked away. On the ground, the men of the ghost train watched with pounding hearts as their hunters vanished into the clouds. Armand collapsed onto a crate. "He saw us," he whispered. "They absolutely saw us." Etienne felt the weight of dread. "It's over." But Morel stepped forward, eyes burning with cold resolve. "No, not yet." Etienne stared at him. "Sir, they know." "Yes, and that means they will come for us, tonight, tomorrow, or the next day." Armand swallowed hard. "What do we do?" Morel looked toward the forest, where their decoys stood battered and exposed. "We prepare our final performance, the most dangerous one yet." His voice hardened. "One last ghost train." A silence fell, because everyone knew the next act would not be an illusion. It would be survival.
The forest felt different the next night. Tense, hollow, holding its breath like a theater moments before the curtain rose. The soldiers could sense it. The Germans now knew the truth. And if the ghost train had once been a clever trick, it had now become a liability. The enemy would not be fooled again. They would not circle politely this time. They would strike. Yet Morel insisted they prepare the illusion anyway. Etienne followed him through the shadowed trees, watching as the captain inspected each canvas frame, each lantern slit, each resonance barrel with slow, methodical precision. It was ritualistic, almost reverent, as though he were walking through the remnants of a stage that had witnessed 100 standing ovations. "Sir," Etienne finally said,
unable to remain silent. Why build it again? They saw through it. They'll fire on this sector the moment they return. Morel did not answer immediately. He touched the canvas engine, fingers brushing its soot-stained surface like a man saying farewell to an old friend. "Because, Lieutenant," he said softly, "tonight the ghost train is not meant to fool them. It is meant to hold them." Etienne frowned. "Hold them?" "Command has moved our divisions north as planned. But the Germans will redeploy quickly now that they know the deception. If they rush their troops back before dawn, our offensive will collapse before it even begins." Etienne felt the realization settle like a stone in his stomach. "So we need to delay them." "Yes," Morel said. "Even half a night could decide the fate of thousands." Armand approached, lantern light catching the fear etched across his features. "Captain, if they attack the forest, we'll be trapped. The stage won't protect us." Morel placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we must make our final act memorable enough to keep them guessing." Etienne knew what that meant. The ghost train crew would be bait, human bait, buying time with their lives if necessary. On the German side, Kramer prepared for another flight. This time there was no ambiguity in his orders. "Confirm the decoy," his commander said, face stone hard. "Then mark the location for artillery. We end this nonsense tonight." Kramer's jaw tightened. He respected the enemy's ingenuity. Destroying their handiwork felt strangely like vandalizing a masterpiece. But orders were orders. As he climbed into the cockpit, Hans Metz strapped in beside him. "You really think they'll rebuild it?" Hans asked. "They will," Kramer said grimly. "A deception that bold does not die quietly." Hans shook his head. "Let's finish this, Otto." Kramer wasn't sure he wanted to. Dusk bled into night. The French forest glowed faintly with the preparation fires of the ghost train crew. Etienne helped position the resonance barrels again, though his hands shook with cold and fear. Armand adjusted the lantern wheels. His movements were slower tonight, as if the weight of the coming danger pushed against every gesture. "Etienne, remember when I said war was theater?" he murmured. "Yes." Armand gave a hollow laugh. "I should have chosen a smaller theater." "After tonight, maybe we both will," Etienne forced a smile he didn't feel. Morel blew his whistle sharply. "Positions! Eyes on the sky!" The forest fell silent. Then, faintly, the familiar drone arrived, distant but inevitable. "They're coming," Etienne whispered. Morel put a hand on his shoulder. "Whatever happens, Lieutenant, thank you for believing in a ridiculous idea. It saved lives. Maybe it'll save more." They looked up together as two German aircraft emerged through the clouds. One reconnaissance plane, one fighter. "Begin," Morel ordered, for the last time.
The ghost train awakened. Etienne struck the first barrel. Tong, tong, tong. Armand spun the lantern wheel. Light flickered through the slits. Faster, brighter, uneven. Smoke billowed upward in thick sheets, catching the moonlight like ghostly fabric. But this time, Kramer didn't circle from afar. He dove straight toward them. Etienne swallowed a rising panic. "He's coming too close." Armand tightened his grip on the wheel. "He wants to see our trick up close. Let him."
Morel shouted, "Keep the lights going! Etienne, vary the rhythm!" Etienne struck harder, faster, irregularly. His arms trembled. Sweat stung his eyes despite the bitter cold. The German fighter fired a warning burst, bright tracers streaking across the treetops. Armand flinched. "They're giving us a chance to run." "No," Morel said. "They're warning us they see us." Etienne kept streaking the barrels. The train roared in the night, louder than ever, bolder than ever, a ghost defying its hunters. Kramer peered down from his cockpit. "They rebuilt it." Hans exhaled. "Otto, they know we know. Why'd put themselves in danger?" "To stall us. They're trying to buy time." Hans's voice shook. "Should we mark the coordinates?" Kramer watched the silhouettes below, men risking their lives inside fragile wooden illusions. Not soldiers, actors, heroes of a different kind. He raised the radio, torn between duty and admiration. "Mark the site, Otto," Hans urged. "If we delay, artillery will have less time." But Kramer hesitated. "I won't be the man who kills artists," he said quietly. Hans stared at him. "Otto, this is war, which is why a moment of humanity means more now than ever." Hans swallowed hard. "Then what do we report?" Kramer made his choice. "Tell command the decoy looks abandoned. No movement, no reason to waste shells." Hans nodded slowly. "All right, I'll send the message." Kramer turned the plane. "We go home." But not before he dipped his wings in a silent salute to the men below, men brave enough to challenge him with shadows. On the ground, Etienne watched the German planes turn away. "They're leaving," he breathed. Armand slumped down. "It worked. Somehow it worked." But Morel shook his head. "No, that man spared us." Etienne stared. "How can you be sure?" "Because he saw everything. He was close enough to hit us if he wished." Etienne's breath caught. "He let us live." "For one night," Morel said. "But command will not always listen to pilots. They will send others, artillery, infantry. This forest will not be safe much longer." Armand hugged his lantern wheel, trembling. "Then this was truly our last show." Morel nodded. "Take it all down. Tonight we disappear." By dawn, the ghost train was gone. Canvas frames dismantled, lanterns extinguished, barrels buried, smoke rigs smashed. The forest, once a clandestine theater, returned to silence. Morel gathered the crew. His voice was rough, weary. "You all saved more than a sector. You saved an army. The Germans will spend hours debating whether we're still here. Meanwhile, our offensive begins in the north. And us? We retreat, quietly, before they return." Etienne looked back at the tracks one last time. The rusted rails glimmered faintly in the morning sun, innocent and empty. It was hard to believe they had ever held a ghost. As the men packed their gear, Etienne wondered about the German pilot, the one who had seen through their trick and yet chosen not to kill them. Somewhere across the front, Kramer was likely handing in his report, choosing his own kind of bravery. War was strange that way. Sometimes courage looked like charging a trench. Sometimes it looked like refusing to pull a trigger. Months later, after the war ended, rumor spread among surviving soldiers about a bizarre legend, a phantom convoy that haunted a certain French forest, appearing only in moonlight, rumbling with the sound of wheels that did not exist. Older veterans would smile knowingly. "Ah yes," they'd say, "the ghost train, the one that saved 1,000 men." And sometimes, rarely, someone would add, "A German pilot once saw it close up. He never said what he thought of it, but he lived the rest of his life swearing that shadows can be braver than steel." The ghost train deception was over, but its story, the story you just read, never truly stopped moving. Just like a train,
even one made of ghosts.